If you're a company that has a physical product, if you have an investigated price optimization product, you should, because they have a very quick payback.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
Man, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the analytical relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving. Today our guest is Mark Thomason. Here are 3 things you want to know about Mark before we start. He's Research Director of Digital Business Models and Monetization at IDC, and that title is why we invited him on the podcast today. He's been head of market intelligence at a large software firm for the 6 years prior to that, and he's a big supporter of electric vehicles. He worked hard in the 2010 timeframe to bring electric cars to Orlando, Florida. Welcome, Mark.
Hey, glad to be here.
It's going to be fun. Okay, I got to ask quickly, do you have an electric car?
Of course.
Okay,
I'm on my 3rd one.
Really?
So I did a lease of a Nissan Leaf back in 12. That's when I got it.
Mm-hmm.
That's when they came to Orlando. They were on the West Coast before that. And then I had that for 3 years, and then I had a BMW i3 for 3 years. And then I was on the list to get a Tesla 3. But they delayed the shipments to the East Coast past when I was getting rid of my car, when the lease was up. So I ended up leasing another i3 for another 2 years. And then on the 15th of this month, I get my Tesla 3 Performance.
Nice. And okay, I got so many questions I want to ask, but let's move to pricing.
Oh man, you don't want to talk about cars anymore? All right, fair enough.
So I love IDC, but I'm not sure all of our listeners know what IDC does. Could you tell us what IDC does?
Sure. So we are a market research firm. We've been around over 50 years. We've got 1,100 analysts around the world. We're known for our numbers. So we've got this system that we call the tracker, IDC tracker. And for many years, probably at least 20, we have been collecting revenue data from technology companies on a quarterly basis. So for the companies that we track, we call them up, or we engage with them once a quarter and ask them how much they sold in this market. Because we've got 84 functional markets, 85 functional markets that kind of roll up to a bunch of secondary markets that roll up to 3 primary markets. So that's how I kind of organize technology. And these are broken out, from all different types. So we basically break it out into applications, developer, platform as a service type of stuff, and system infrastructure software.
Yeah, and so you're going to sell research to, I'm going to assume it's relatively large firms mostly.
Correct.
So Mr. Large Firm comes to you. What are they going to buy from you?
Well, they have so we're known for the trackers and we're known for that data, but we have a bunch of subscription-based analyst services. So like my service, the Digital Business Models and Monetization, is what we call a CIS, or a continuous information service. And that means I'm an analyst focused on this area. I don't change and move to somewhere else. I focus on this, and I work with a bunch of vendors that have a subscription with me. So I work with these vendors on a heavy basis, and have briefings and kind of understand how the market's going, and that happens all across our domain. So we have a whole bunch of analysts that are focused on different markets, that companies, big companies and small and medium-sized companies, come to us because we have different packages for each. Will come to us and either so when they get a subscription from me, they get everything that I write, which is over 16 documents in a year. And then I also partner with other analysts, and those get published into my service too. They get a bunch of time with me, so they can call me up and work through, whatever kind of CI issues or communications issues. And then, from there, we have an a la carte menu of a bunch of custom applications. So we can do white papers and all sorts of things, videos and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's how we monetize.
Sounds perfect. And now a customer comes and wants to engage with you.
Mm-hmm.
What are they buying from you? So define digital business models and monetization for me.
Yeah, that's a fun thing. So I started this gig a little over 2 years ago. I had been working with IDC as, with my former positions as a market intelligence leader. So I had relationships with IDC and Forrester and Gartner and 451 and ESG and a whole bunch of other TLAs. And really good folks out there. But when I was leaving, or when I was at the end of that, I wanted to become an analyst because it's a pretty cool gig. You get paid to learn. So that's the cool part. And the bad thing is, if you're curious, there's tons of things to learn. And then it really just becomes a time management thing on how you manage your time, when you stop learning, when you start writing, and when's enough. So that's usually the hard part.
Sounds like
But
fun.
they would get from me everything that I write. And when I work with them, they might want something, so I can go around to other analysts. We're sort of like a big college where you can go over to another analyst who's been there for 15 years and knows a certain domain really, really deep, and I can go figure out answers or get other people on the phone, and we can solve a really big problem.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to get at right now, Mark, is what are digital business models?
Sure.
So what are you writing about?
So what I did when I got into this, it was kind of undefined when I arrived, but what I did is I basically carved out what I call the monetization ecosystem, which if you're on LinkedIn, I've posted it a while back. I need to make it a permanent thing. But it's a graphic, and on the left side of the graphic, it has vendor income, or excuse me, basically the customer. And then as you transfer over from the left side to the right side, you go through what I call opportunity capture type features. So this would be like your CRM or your e-commerce, or some way of or omni-channel commerce, some way of getting the sale. And then it comes into a bunch of green boxes, which is the monetization area. So once you click on something and you want to buy it, or you go through a salesperson and you go through a configure price quote type of solution, it goes into the monetization domain, or what I call the ecosystem. And this includes a whole bunch of functions. And so if you take all these functions and you kind of bubble them up to forward-looking platforms that I look after, it kind of basically comes down to 4. So one is subscription management companies. So these are your Zuora, your Aria Systems, your GoTransverse type of companies that manage a subscription. They understand the relationship, what you bought. They understand revenue recognition really well. And they interface with a bunch of other applications like the opportunity capture part, or as you go to the right, the accounting applications where you drop the money. And so elsewhere in the monetization area, I just covered subscription management. I cover price optimization and price management products. And those typically have a price guidance type of feature, which could be price guidance, or it could be CPQ as a front end to the people part of it. And then what I call usage intelligence. And this is the things that, if you're in the telecom area, it's called mediation. So you're just taking a bunch of customer records and you're aggregating them so you can blend them all together and charge on them. So if you've got one customer account, you can understand how much they used of this. And it might be simple. It might just come from one platform and need to be rated and charged on that. Or it might come from a variety of sources, and you have to understand what's noise and how to get rid of ambiguity and how to aggregate. So these things can be really simple, or they can be really complex.
Okay.
And then the last bit is entitlement. How you once you buy something, you basically entitled to use it. And if it's a digital product, it gets go through an entitlement management type of process, or it can be the part of the beginning of supply chain. So that's like all these little boxes. That's how the monetization part, that's the part that I cover. And then there's other analysts and other functional markets around me that handle like, you know, the stuff on left or right of me of the CRM or the ERP systems or supply chain management, those types of things that I talk to, you know, so to speak.
Yep. Okay, so I'm sitting here, I'm looking at it, and we'll make sure we post a graphic of this or the PDF of this in the show notes so anybody can go look at it as well.
Sure.
What so what I think I'm hearing you say is that you could take any of those functions that typically happen in a company, and then there's a series of companies that sell services to fulfill that function. So we talked about Zuora for billing and services or subscriptions, and there are companies like Pros and Vendavo that do price optimization or price setting.
Yep.
Okay, and so that's what you're doing is you're watching all of these big, I guess I would call them software vendors because I'm not sure if there's anything
Absolutely.
but software vendors.
That's exactly what they are.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. And so are you watching who gets how much revenue? Or,
yes.
Well, you already said yes. And are you also watching what the new technologies are?
Yes.
So if I'm using one, what else is coming out in another area?
Yeah. So once a year, one of the documents that we put together is a futurescape. And that's basically our way, our sexy way of saying, here's 10 predictions in this area, in the monetization area. And so I look at the tea leaves and basically put down 10 predictions with the help of a whole bunch of smart colleagues that I work with. And, you know, basically B2B recommendations is one of those. That's one of the things that I'm working on this year, is just kind of like understanding, you know, recommendations has been, you know, if you shop on Amazon or you know, listen to Spotify, you're getting a recommendation thrown at you by a machine. And that's all well and good. And some of these are pretty lower order, you know, like in an e-commerce situation, if you've clicked on this before or looked at it, then they're going to say you might be interested in it, or they might be, you know, they pull in a competitor's product. But on the B2B recommendations area, this is an area of kind of like using data to help expansion in a situation. So understanding who that customer is, what size they are, being able to blend data together so you can kind of like tell a story and add them to a story, and basically set up this recommendation, you know, is sort of like a rule-based type of thing. If this and this and this happen, then this is a, you know, good recommendation to throw at them. Well, there's companies now, you know, Pros is one of them. They have a formal product that's out there that uses artificial intelligence to look at all the transactions from, you know, the various segments of customers that you have, and be able to understand what might be the right recommendation to throw at you. And not at you, but basically offer to the salesperson so they can, you know, if it's a salesperson-led type of thing, they can give that to the person. Or if it's an e-commerce-led, you know, throw it up to the robot that shows you what you might be needing. But that's kind of a sexy, cool thing because you know, it sounds easy, but there's a lot of sources of information that you could use to better those signals. And the hard part is kind of like, how do you blend those? Because it's a lot of noise and it's a lot of data. So how do you do it? And what should you be using? And, you know, there's a lot that you could use is all that stuff, you know, what's noise and what are the 3 things that you need? And so a lot of attention needs to go into, and this is where we are in this space, is kind of like crawl, walk, run. Today we're crawling around, we're kind of like learning like what can we use in the ecosystem of data to help us, you know, price better or offer better, and basically just kind of like understand when something works more often than not, and so that's kind of the part of, you know, in the pricing and subscriptions to a degree, but that's what we're going through right now. It's just starting to use these new tools. Well, they're not new, but machine learning and artificial intelligence to help us do those workloads better. But there's just a lot of learning that we have to do to understand what actually works and what's noise.
Yeah,
So
that's pretty fascinating. In the old days, and by the old days I mean, say 10 years ago,
mhm,
they used to do, um, they called it pricing science, and they would use
mhm.
microsegmentation and try to figure out, oh, here's the size of the segment. Now it sounds like they're trying to use AI to gather more of that information and adjust those numbers real time instead of creating the segments once or once a year or something like that.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what's happened. So they've moved from a rules-based system, if-thens, that are much more complicated than simple if-thens.
Right.
The price optimization products just a few years ago, when you bought them, you basically bought, the product, but there was a team of data scientists behind that would have to take your data, look at it, analyze it, set up a model, give you that model, and then check that model over time to make sure it was working correctly. And today with SaaS and today with AI, that a lot of that stuff is not so high touch anymore. And it can be monitored and tweaked, from afar, back at headquarters, from the dude that might be on the beach somewhere else, programming from afar.
Yeah.
So it's done more with more agility today, and working better, because now we can do, basically testing afterwards and look at, what was done and do back testing and find out how you need to tweak the model to make it better.
Nice, nice. Okay, so Mark, I want you to surprise me or excite me or something like that. And so it was probably a year or so ago I ran into Zuora. And the whole reason I ran into Zuora was I was studying subscriptions really, really hard. And I said, oh my gosh, this whole subscription thing is very different than traditional businesses.
Hmm.
And so you see companies like Zuora come out and, oh, now I've got to do something different. I have to take care of this new business model. What else is out there that's exciting, that's changing dramatically that maybe I haven't seen yet?
Right now, it goes back to the data thing. So there's Zuora was first on, well, not first on the market, but they were early in the market. They started in 2007, but the oldest vendor is like 2002. Or at least the one that I just tested. I did a MarketScape, and that was released at the beginning of the year, and that was on 13 vendors. And these 13 vendors can do math really well. They can do accounting really well. So a lot of the base functionality of managing subscriptions is really just making sure that you do revenue recognition correctly. But that's all easy the first way through. But when you start changing subscriptions, adding more seats, declining seats, changing your tier, changing your bundle, change. Just the whole word change that's where the magic on these products shine, because they will handle that ripple effect down of what's going to happen to what's going to happen to the bill, what's going to happen to your forward-looking revenue, your forward-looking MRR, and be able to do that accounting and forecasting so you can understand what's happening with your business, today and in a few months from now. So those products do that today pretty good. And where they're going today is they're getting either, one of the big plays is just using the data that they see pass through them and be able to automate things. One way of saying it is analytics driven automation. So you set up a watch for some sort of an occurrence of something, and if this happens, then we're going to do something. And in the monetization space, there's all sorts of new signals. It kind of goes back to what we're talking about with pricing, to get these signals into the subscription management. And usage is a big deal. So usage intelligence is basically watching it could be some people think it's surreptitious. Somebody's watching me do something, but really if you've ever made a product and you've been a product manager before, what you really want after spending a whole lot of time creating a product or creating a feature and then pushing it out to the public, you'd really want to know if people are using it. And if they're getting stumbled upon, if they start using it and they don't understand it and they just stop before, they get to a certain point, you want to know that as a product manager. And as from a monetization point of view, you want to understand your value metrics. And if you're a software company, if you can identify and watch, basically your users use, features or capabilities of your product, you can go, okay, now I can watch over the shoulders of my, potentially thousands of customers, and I can know what this cohort values. The SMB seems to use these features a lot, and the enterprise group, they seem to use these features a whole lot. And when I developed my tiers, I had the features in the wrong tiers. So now that kind of gives me some really good insight where I can balance my tiers correctly, because now I have data on which company uses these features, and then I can group those companies up into cohorts and look at them and evaluate them, and then develop my, not enforce, but add to my personas that I have on who might be buying this type of a bundle. And I can be a lot more exact. I can use data science, and this can be something that happens through the year. It doesn't happen once a year when you do your big surveys or your customer advisory group. It could be on a daily basis. You could see this stuff. So that kind of data gets funneled into your subscription management, and you can see that happen inside that that application. Also, you can see just the high level what you're rating on, and you can understand and maybe take action on a customer that is about to churn. And how do you know he's about to churn? Well, you're looking at his usage of the product, you're looking at his billing of the product, you're looking at different signals that will tell you that the person has has lost interest with it, has abandoned the product, or is starting to use the thing like crazy, like download a whole bunch of things right before they terminate their their contract.
Yep.
So there's, depending on the type of product or the type of solution that you're doing, you can listen for these certain signals and understand when somebody's going to churn. And if you can do that on aggregate, that's a wonderful thing.
So Mark, first off, I got to say thank you, because you just advertised for the course that I'm working on right now, which is how to package features into bundles, right? Your good, better, best package, or your market segments, and usage data is a great way to do that. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But what I didn't know, that you did surprise me, so thank you. That was really good. But I didn't know that companies like Zuora were now collecting or gathering that usage data. I thought that was other companies that were doing it. And Zuora was mostly on the billing, revenue management side. They do.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say that so what I call usage intelligence, those products, the Revulytics of the world, Flexera's of the world. And then there's another group of customers, or group of vendors, like the customer data platform type companies, or the Pendo, Amplitudes, and Heaps of the world, that collect this usage data on different types of applications. And then there's API monetization products that will understand how many times an API has been accessed, and who did it, and what did they pull, what dimensions were pulled, if it's a data as a service type of thing. And that data in those platforms, you can see the whole thing. Yep. But what goes up to Zuora or one of those types of products is the thing that you're actually charging on. So the usage intelligence application is going to give you the full gamut of things, so you can understand value.
And those things are absolutely crucial to knowing where your customers are in their journey. Are they onboarding well? Are they getting ready to churn? Are they ready to upsell? I mean, those are phenomenal.
Yeah, that's where the recommendations come in. It's kind of like you're listening for things, and now you can give the tools to a junior salesperson, and you can enable them to act more like a senior salesperson, because you've given them a lot of insight on the behavior of a company or a customer, to give them that that boost. And then
and you could also think of it as automated prospecting. So we're only going to go after the right clients.
Well, that's a beginning of the funnel. That's
Right.
in the that would be in the marketing area. But you could certainly use that if you're doing a
Oh,
freemium or a trial type of product.
I'm sorry.
That's wonderful. That.
What I meant, Mark, was if I were selling a big product to enterprise level customers,
Hmm.
then I would be watching their usage to know when it's time to go upsell that customer before I
Hmm.
send my sales team out.
Yes.
So
Yes.
prospecting that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Hey, this has just been a hoot. Um, Mark, I like to end with this question, and even though it isn't exactly you, I'm going to ask it anyway. What one piece of pricing advice would you give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Well, that depends on the business type. So if you're a company that is in, that makes a product that has a physical product, if you have an investigated price optimization product, you should, because they have really, when I looked at those last year, they have a very quick payback for what they can do. And they have a very quick payback from the customers I talk to, because in a lot of companies, they have, they're in a B2B situation, you give pricing exceptions, not obsessions, but exceptions to certain customers for a product. And if you've done it, if the salesperson did it right and they have an expiration date on it, all's well and good. This price is good for this time. But in a lot of cases, these products get the price optimization products get turned on, and they'll find all these exceptions of customers paying lower prices on something because there wasn't an expiration date on it. So some of these types of customers saw like a less than 1 month payback because it just lit up those types of problems. And then also, if that's not your issue, then it's going to be, are you underpricing based on the cohort or the segment of user that you're going after? And they can, if you've got a complex amount of SKUs and you're shipping things across borders, you got taxes across borders. If you get a complex situation, you're affected by tariffs that are changing more often than they should, then these products can really help you with the complexity of dealing with that. So if you're a software vendor and you're trying to price your products, well, then that's a different thing. The price optimization products aren't there yet. So they're getting there. And the reason they're not there is really about data availability. In a software world, the amount of transactions that you have is a lot lower than how many cans of soup goes through a grocery store, or an air filter for a car or something, something that transacts a lot to a lot of different places. So data is king in the world of analytics. And so the more that you have, the more you can do with, work with. So when it comes down to pricing for software, it's really more of a people-led, a consulting-led type of thing. And a lot of companies don't do it nearly as much because it is a big ordeal to do. So the advantage there would be to, not be so, not, it's not a scary thing, but do it more often than you probably do. And really understand your value metrics so you can really understand what you should be paying, and how you're different than the other company, and don't always go for, a competitive pricing angle.
Yep. So I am always impressed with the payback period on pricing. And in fact, it doesn't have to be a pricing system. It almost is to the point if somebody says the word pricing inside a company, you get a payback for that. There's so much opportunity there. It isn't funny.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you'd be really surprised that across the monetization scope of products, so the usage, entitlement, and pricing, and subscriptions, it's still greenfield.
yeah.
When I talk to my vendors, they're still replacing, and typically the number one thing that they're replacing is Excel, because there's still a whole lot of that out there. So it's still early day. I can't say early days, but it's still young days in the world of automating, the pricing or subscriptions part of a business.
Yeah.
People, the whole
So,
monetization area is really just not that well known.
yeah, I think the reason for that though is every company is so different. Every industry is so different. And so it's hard to get this generic package that says, oh, this works in all these different companies or all these different industries.
Mm-hmm.
You see some companies that are focused on specific industries because once they get that industry down, it's like, oh, here's how the channel works. Here's how to get this data. And that makes a lot of sense, but you can't take that and move it to some other industry because it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, but today you've got products that can cross industry pretty good. And I think the reason why they haven't been as, it's people aren't running for the gates to onboard one is they just don't understand what the upside is from managing it yourself to using, one of these platforms to either ease the use, how many people you have that are, helping you close your books on at the end of in a quarter, or, one of the things that really helped with bringing on board the subscription products was a new revenue recognition rule, ASC 606. And so when that new rule came around, it was kind of like the right time for a lot of businesses in the middle of their digital transformation, thoughts to say, okay, we want to mechanize this. We want to get a software package that automates this, because when you do, then you can use that data that's usually in an Excel spreadsheet, and you can use it in different applications because you can ask for it and you can analyze it in different ways. So it's more like democratization of that data that you have, that if it's in Excel, it's really kind of confined to the corner. And then you really have to worry about, or it's really going to be on that geek that you have that really loves data, that'll look at it and be in charge of it and be able to manage that at a high degree. And if you don't have somebody like that, then an application like either subscription management or pricing can do it automatically and make you a whole lot smarter, just because it's telling you the stuff that you should know and allowing you to manipulate things in grand scale.
Excellent. Mark, we're going to have to wrap this up, but thank you so much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
I am Thomason at idc.com, and you can go to idc.com and search for me as an analyst, and you can look at what I've published already or what I'm going to publish in the future, and we can talk if you're interested. All
right. Episode 57, all finished. Let's see. What was my favorite part of today's podcast? I think I enjoyed the very end where we started talking about Zuora and having access to data, or what data they have access to. That was very interesting to me. What was your favorite part? Please let us know in the comments of wherever you downloaded and listened. And while you're at it, would you please give us a 5-star review? I noticed several people have done that recently, and it's really helpful, and huge thank you to all of you. Please don't forget about the community at championsofvalue.com. You can grab all of the content that we put out there, participate. There's a free community, and there's also an insiders community, which gives you access to all of our content. If you have any questions or comments about the podcast or about pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact.